Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our weekly Thursday morning Parsha Shiur. This week, of course, is Parsha Shmini. Please join me as we study together some insights and some ideas from the Parsha. For this week, I'm going to begin not at the beginning of the Parsha, but a little bit into it at the beginning of Perek Yud. So I'm starting, if you have a Chumash in front of you, Perek Yud, Pasuk Aleph. What's going on here in the Parsha is that the Mishkan has finally been set up. After they had collected all the money, all the donations from all the Jews, after the construction had been completed under the leadership of Bezalel and Oholiav, after all the money had been counted for, after all the vessels had been made, after the 7 days of training had been completed, the Mishkan was finally set up. It was finally in action. Moshe and Aaron had already come out of the Oil Moed and blessed the people. Hashem's honor, Hashem's presence had finally come down. A fire from heaven had come down, consumed the korbanos, the sacrifices that the Kohanim had placed upon the Mishkan. The glory of Hashem was apparent. It was revealed. Everything was working exactly as it was supposed to. The Torah says that when the people saw this, they fell on their faces in great spiritual ecstasy, and everything seems to have come together exactly, beautifully, and perfectly as planned. That's what happened till here. Perek Yud Pasuk Aleph says the Torah, Vayikchu b'nei Aaron, disaster strikes. The two sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, take ish mach tosai, each man took his fire pan. Vayitnu v'hein eish, and they placed fire upon these pans. Vayasinu aleho ketoros, and they put ketoros, they put incense upon the pans. Vayakrivu lifnei Hashem eish zora, and they brought in front of Hashem an eish zora, a foreign fire. Asher lo tziva oisam, literally this means they, Nadav and Avihu, were not commanded to do this. And yet they did it anyways. Pasuk Beis, Vateitze Eish Melifnei Hashem, a fire comes out from before Hashem, Vatoichal Oisam, and consumed them, Vayomusu Lifnei Hashem, and they died there in the presence of Hashem. Pasuk Gimel, Vayomer Moshe el Aaron, and Moshe says to Aaron, Hu Asher Diber Hashem, this is the fulfillment of the words of Hashem. Lamer, when Hashem said, Bikroivai ekodesh, I will be sanctified, I will become holy with those who are closest to me. Val pnei kol ha'om ekoved, and in the presence of the people I will be honored. Vayidoim Aaron, and Aaron is silent. Okay, we'll stop over here for now, although of course there's much more, but we'll pause here, we'll reflect, and we'll discuss some of the commentary given by the rabbis in the story. So again, the date here is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the first day of Nisan, almost exactly 1 year since the Jewish people have left the land of Mitzrayim. This is the first day where the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the Mishkan that they set up in the Midbar is functional. It's working. Hashem's presence have come down after the first korbanos were brought and the fire came down from heaven and consumed them. The two sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, died in the Mishkan on the first day of operation. What happened? What did they do? The Torah tells us no more and no less than they took each man, ish machtosa, each man took his fire pan or his frying pan. They put a fire on it. They put incense upon this fire pan, and they brought in front of Hashem an eish zora, a fire that they were not commanded to do. That's all the Torah says. A fire comes out from before Hashem in the Mishkan, consumes them, and they died. They dropped dead, literally on the ground. And Moshe says to Aaron, you see, this is the fulfillment of what Hashem promised. This is Hashem told us this would happen. And look, here it is. Vayidom Aaron, and Aaron is silent. Okay. Of the many parts of the story that the rabbis reflect on and analyze, let's start with Let's start with this. Let's start with an understanding of what exactly did Nadav and Avihu, these two sons of Aaron. Aaron, of course, at this point has four sons, Nadav and Avihu, Elazar and Isamar. Nadav and Avihu died on day one, literally within the first hour or even within the first couple of moments that the Mishkan is functional. What exactly did they do wrong? What was their sin that was so terrible that for this they deserved capital punishment right there on the spot, without any warning, without any indication that this was going to happen? A fire just rushes forth, consumes them, and they dies. And they die right there. So here, interestingly, Rashi brings two opinions, but I want to focus just for a minute. There's a Balaturim. Again, if you have it in front of you, it's on Pasuk Beis. The Balaturim on the word oisam, vatoichal oisam, the fire consumed. Oisam means them. The Balaturim says the word oisam is written here with an extra vav, to tell us, says the Balaturim, that the sons of Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu consumed 6 sins. The gematria, of course, of the letter vav is 6. They consumed 6 sins. They committed 6 averas, 6 sins for which they deserved capital punishment. And he lists them very briefly. I'll try to explain at least very briefly what they are. Oisam mole vav, says the Balaturim. The word oisam is written with a vav. Shechota b'shisha dvarim. They sinned. They committed 6 sins. What were they? Number 1, eish zora, a foreign fire. This is literally the words of the pasuk in pasuk Aleph. Eish zora, a foreign fire. It seems one of the sins that the sons of Aaron did is that they brought a fire into the Mishkan rather than taking the fire from the Mizbeach. This was apparently a sin, one which the Torah has, to the best of my knowledge, until this point not articulated. We've never been told this, but yet here it is. One of the sins, one of the forbidden things forbidden to do in the Mishkan is bring in fire from outside the Mishkan. Once the fire from Hashem came down on the Mizbeach, from now on, all sacrifices that were brought in the temple, in the Mishkan, all the incense that was brought in the Mishkan, everything that was brought as a carbon to Hashem, the fire always had to come from the Mizbeach. And these two, Nadav and Avihu, they did not know this, or they did not obey this, and they brought an eish zora, they brought a foreign fire, they brought fire into the Mishkan from outside, and this was sin number 1. Number 2, says the Balaturim, hoiru bifnei rabam. This, according to the Talmud, is a very, very grave and very, very serious sin. Hoiru bifnei rabam means they ruled, they gave halachic rulings in the presence of their teacher without first taking permission from their teacher. This is not to be taken lightly at all. The Gemara says that the punishment for this, we learn from here, is capital punishment. In the presence of one's teacher, in the presence of one's Rebbe, one may never issue a halachic ruling without explicit permission from the teacher himself. Even, the Gemara says, even if someone asks you a halachic question, if your teacher is nearby, if your teacher is present, you may never respond to the questioner and tell them what the halacha is. If somebody says to you, what bracha is an apple? Right? Not a very difficult or complicated halachic question. And you're tempted to just say, haitz. That's the halacha, pari priyaitz. No, says the Gemara, not that simple. Before you issue a halachic ruling, before you answer a question, make sure your teacher is not present. Be sure you're not doing so in the presence of your Rebbe, in the presence of your Torah teacher, because to issue a ruling in the presence of your Torah teacher is considered disrespectful. It's considered me'ila. It's considered rude, chutzpahdik. How dare you issue a halachic ruling in the presence of your teacher? If your teacher is there, even if you know the answer, even if it's so simple and so straightforward, you must defer out of kavod, out of honor to your teacher and say, you're asking me? We're in the presence of my teacher. Let's both turn together and ask him, Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu, my teacher, what halacha do you make on an apple? The teacher has the right to either answer the question himself or turn to the student and say, please go ahead, answer the question, no problem. But the student is obligated to ask first and may never issue a ruling without consulting the teacher first. It's called Lohoireis Bifnei Rabbi. In this case, Nodav and Avihu committed this sin, where they issued a halachic ruling in the presence of their teacher. Who was their teacher? Their teachers, of course, were Moshe, their uncle, and Aaron, their father. Moshe, the leader of the generation, Aaron, the Kohen Gadol. What was the halacha that they issued? They ran in and they offered up ketores. Were they allowed to offer up the ketores? Were they not allowed to offer up the ketores? Was it a good idea? Was it not a good idea? Was this okay? Was this not okay? They took the law into their own hands, Nadav and Avihu. They decided it was a good idea. They decided this is something they wanted to do. They decided it was the right time, it was the right place, and they rushed in and they did it. It wasn't, at least according to this, number 2 on the list, it wasn't that they necessarily did the wrong thing. It wasn't that they necessarily issued a halachic ruling that was incorrect. Because the prohibition to issue a halachic ruling in the presence of your teacher is not a prohibition only merely against issuing an incorrect halachic ruling. Even a correct halachic ruling may not be issued in the presence of one's teacher. In this case, says the Baal HaTurim, number 2, perhaps what they did was correct, but a chutzpah, how dare you do so in the presence of your teacher without first consulting your teacher? Perhaps if they would have asked Moshe and Aaron, can we do this? Can we offer up the ketores? Perhaps Moshe and Aaron would have said, Pajalasta, with pleasure. But they were supposed to ask, and they didn't. So sin number 2, Hoyru bifnei Rabbam, they issued this halachic ruling in the presence of their teacher. Number 3, Shesuye Yayin. According to the third interpretation, their sin was that they entered into the Mishkan after having drunk consumed wine. They were halachically drunk, and this was forbidden. Where do we get that from? Where do we get this idea? I mean, where does that even come from? The idea that they came into the Mishkan drinking wine, where do you get that from? At least the far and fire, the Torah says. At least the idea that they did so without permission from their teachers, that one can deduce from the verses, because it doesn't say anywhere that Moshe and Aaron gave them this instruction. But where does this idea come from that they came into the Mishkan after having consumed wine? So this is also deduced here from the verses, because later on in a couple of psukim, Hashem will issue an instruction to Aaron. Here in Pasuk Zayin, I believe, Pasuk Ches, Vayidaber Hashem al Aaron, Hashem says to Aaron, Yayin v'sheichar al teisht, issued a warning from now on, Kohanim may not enter the Mishkan after they had drunk wine or consumed beer or any type of alcoholic beverage, etc., etc. Why is the Torah giving this instruction now? Apparently, Nadav and Avihu took a good l'chaim, they had some wine to drink, and then they went into the Mishkan after that. And so this was the third reason, the third sin that they committed. They entered into the Mishkan in an inebriated state. Number 4, Bonim lo yhoyu lohem, says the Baal HaTurim. Number 4, the reason why the 2 sons of Aaron died was because they didn't have children. This is an incredibly difficult reason to understand, but not without source, not without precedent. The Torah does say, at some point in the story describing the 2 deaths of the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, the Torah does tell us, Bonim lo yhoyu lohem, that at the time that they were killed, they were childless. When you read the verse at a simple level, it seems like the Torah is just filling in details. They didn't have children. No, say the rabbis. The Torah is not just telling us that they didn't have children. The Torah is telling us that one of the reasons that they died was because they didn't have children. Of course, it doesn't mean that they didn't have children beyond their control. It means they didn't get married, and they never engaged in the mitzvah of pru or avu. They never actively got involved in having children. And so this is one more reason why the children of Aaron deserve the death penalty. Okay, let's keep going. Number 5, Nosnu einehem beparnasos. If you don't know the background, you may not know what the Baal HaTurim is referring to here. But this is based on an additional medrash that relates the following tale. The medrash says that the Jews were once taking a walk. The Jewish people, they used to do that often. They used to travel around in the desert, etc. Moshe and Aaron were walking at the front. The Jewish people were walking behind. And somewhere in between Moshe and Aaron at the front, leading the Jews, and the Jewish nation walking behind them, were the sons of Aaron, among them Nadav and Avihu. Of course, the physical layout of how the Jews are walking, with Moshe and Aaron in the front and the Jewish people behind, is not just meant to describe the physical layout, but it's meant to give us a picture of a nation that has leaders and they follow in the path and in the footsteps that their leaders leave for them. Says the Medrash, Nadav and Avihu turn to each other. And one says to the other, I believe Nadav says to Avihu, referring to Moshe and Aaron, Mosa yomusu zakenim elu. When are these old people, Moshe and Aaron, going to die? And you and I, Nadav and Avihu, you and I, says one to the other, will finally take over, and it'll be our turn to be the leaders of the Jewish people. Nadav says this to Avihu, and Avihu doesn't respond. This medrash sees Nadav and Avihu as being two men who were opportunists and waiting for their moment in the limelight when they could finally take over leadership positions of the Jewish people. They were waiting for Moshe and Aaron, the ones they described as the old ones, to finally die so they, Nadav and Avihu, could have their hour in the limelight and finally take over the leadership of the Jewish people. They were eager for this. They were anticipating it. They wanted to be in charge and take over. So one says to the other, Mosa yamusu zakenim elu, when are these old folks finally going to die so we can take over, we can be in charge, and we can lead the Jewish people? And the other brother, Avihu, doesn't respond. Says the Medrash, the Ribbono Shel Olam hears their conversation between the two of them. And the Ribbono Shel Olam says, this is not okay. You guys can't wait for Moshe and Aaron to die so you can take over and become the next Jewish leaders. Hashem says, I swear that's not what's going to happen. Instead, Moshe and Aaron are going to watch you die while they continue to lead the Jewish people for many years because they seek no grandeur. They seek no leadership for themselves. They're doing it only out of duty. Whereas you two opportunists are looking for an opportunity for the limelight to be on you. Hashem said, it's not going to be that way. You're going to die, and Moshe and Aaron are going to continue leading the Jewish people for many years to come. That was reason number 5, or sin number 5, that Nadav and Avihu committed, for which they deserved capital punishment. And finally, says the Baal HaTurim, number 6, Lo notlu eitza. Lo notlu eitza means they didn't seek counsel. Of course, he doesn't mean that they didn't seek counsel with Moshe and Aaron, because that was reason number 2, where they issued a halachic ruling in the presence of their teacher. Lo notlu eitza means before they offered up this ketores, before they offered up this incense and rushed into the Mishkan on day 1 of construction and offered it to Hashem, Lo notlu eitza, they didn't seek counsel with each other. They didn't have a conversation with each other before that. They didn't say to one another, should we do this or should we not? There was no discussion. There was a rush. There was a passion. There was a moment of excitement. And they both ran in and they did this. But there was no conversation. There was no deliberation beforehand. And because of that, Hashem struck them down and they died. 6 reasons, 6 sins described by the Baal HaTurim. Number 1, a foreign fire that didn't come from the Mizbeach. Number 2, they issued a halachic ruling not in the presence of their teachers, Moshe and Aaron, without deferring to them first. Number 3, they were drunk. Number 4, they didn't attempt to fulfill the mitzvah of Pru or Avu. Number 5, they were nosnu einehem. They were jealous. They were anticipating the death of Moshe and Aaron so they could take over. They were opportunists in the leadership sense. Number 6, loy notlu etza. They didn't seek counsel with each other before doing this. They just rushed in and did so. All right. Of course, before we dissect it, you can see straight away that some of these sins seem much more severe, of course, than others, and yet they're all put together in the same list. Before we continue, 3 more reasons actually are articulated by the rabbis in the different midrashim and gemaras. Number 1, well, not number 1, number 7 actually. According to some, Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, there you go. Rabbi Yossi HaGlili says, you know what their sin was? They entered into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. They entered into the Holy of Holies, the place that even the Kohen Gadol himself is only allowed to go once a year on Yom Kippur. Nadav and Avihu walked in there without an invite. Now, of course, we all know that the Kodesh HaKadoshim had a very strict no-tolerance policy, and anybody who went in there without an invitation, or anybody who went in there without belonging there, or anybody who went in there and had any sort of foreign thoughts or any sort of inappropriate activity was immediately struck down. Reason number 7, they went in there, they went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim itself. In fact, where does Rabbi Yossi HaGlili get this from? Later on in a couple of Parshas, in Parshas Achrei, we'll read Hashem's instruction to Moshe to tell Aaron to be sure that other than on Yom Kippur, he never enters the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And the Pasuk says that Hashem spoke to Moshe and told Aaron to give him this instruction, and he spoke to him, quote, Acharei Moshe Shnei B'nai Aaron, after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron. Why is it necessary for the Torah to tell us that this instruction was given after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron? Says Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, simple. This is the reason why the 2 sons of Aaron died. And that was part of the warning that Hashem told Moshe to give Aaron. Tell Aaron, don't go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim when he doesn't belong there. If you do, you'll die, just like your 2 sons died, Nadav and Avihu, for this very same sin of going into the Kodesh HaKadoshim when they weren't invited. That's number 7. Number 8, another reason that's brought down why the 2 sons of Aaron died, Nadav and Avihu, based on a pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim, Vayechazu es Elokim vayochlu vayishtu. Apparently, the sons of Aaron merited to have a great revelation of godliness at the time of the giving of the Torah. They were, although of course they weren't allowed to go all the way up the mountain, but they were allowed to go part of the way up the mountain. And as they did, they merited a tremendous revelation of Hashem. They saw something tremendous. I don't know what they saw. I wasn't there. The rest of the Jews weren't able to see it, but they were able to see it. Vayochlu vayishtu, and they acted disrespectfully at the time of the giving of the Torah. 9 months before this, at the time of the giving of the Torah, they acted disrespectfully in the presence of this revelation of Hashem, and because of that, they were destined to be killed. Because of that, they died here on the first day of the construction of the function of the Mishkan, when they brought this foreign fire into Hashem. It was because of this. Reason number 8 was because of a sin that they committed at the time of the giving of the Torah. And then perhaps most disturbing or most painful of all, reason number 9. The Torah also tells us, Rashi brings in more than one place, that the death of the 2 sons of Aaron was also in part a punishment for Aaron. This was also in part retribution to Aaron himself for facilitating the sin of the golden calf. Later on, Moshe will tell Aaron in the Torah that after Aaron allowed and facilitated the Jews to make and to worship this golden calf, after Aaron instructed the Jews in Parshas Kisisa to go and bring gold from their wives and to go and bring the golden ornaments, and it was thrown into the fire and a golden calf came out, and the Jewish people bowed down to it and offered sacrifices to it and said, Eila Elokecha Yisrael, refer to it as their God. Aaron, who was instrumental in facilitating the entire process, Moshe will tell Aaron, as a result of that, He was supposed to die. The decree was somehow transferred onto his children, onto his 4 sons, Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, and Isamar. And Moshe will tell Aaron later on, he said, I, Moshe, davened for you to save you, and I was successful 50%. And I was not successful 50%. Your 2 sons, Elazar and Isamar, survived through my prayer. The other 2 sons, Nadav and Avihu, did not. And they perished as part of the retribution for Aaron, for his role in the Jewish people's worshiping of the golden calf. According to this reason, it wasn't so much about Nadav and Avihu or anything they had done. It was more inherently a consequence that was waiting, that was always lurking in the dark background, that was hanging, the dark cloud that was hanging over Aaron's head for what he had done 40 days after the giving of the Torah. And here it was, the fulfillment of this, where 2 of his sons died on the day of the construction of the Mishkan. So let's summarize. We have 9 reasons. There are more, but for now, let's work with this. We have 9 reasons articulated by the rabbis, articulated by the Medrash and the Gemara, as to why the 2 sons of Aaron died. Number 1, they brought a foreign fire. Number 2, they issued a halachic ruling in the presence of their teachers. Number 3, they were drunk. Number 4, they didn't engage in the mitzvah of having children. Number 5, they were eager to take for the death of Moshe and Aaron, so they, Nadav and Avihu, could take their place and be the leaders of the Jewish people. Number 6, they didn't take counsel with each other before doing this. Number 7, they went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim in order to bring this sacrifice, the Ketores, on the first day of the function of the Mishkan. Number 8, they acted disrespectfully in the presence of the revelation of Hashem at the time of the giving of the Torah. And number 9, this was a punishment for Aaron for his role in facilitating the golden calf that happened the sin of Avodah Zarah that the Jews worshipped 40 days after the giving of the Torah. These are some of the reasons given by the rabbis for the death of the 2 sons of Aaron. Okay. Time does not allow us to go through each one of these reasons and dissect it fully. Some of them are very difficult to understand. What do we mean? They didn't take counsel with each other. All right, maybe they should have been nicer to each other and talked to each other beforehand, but why is that such a terrible sin? With regard to many of the reasons that the rabbis give, it's difficult to understand why did this happen on the day of the construction of the Mishkan. This was something that had to do with Matan Torah or with the Egel Azov, or the fact that they didn't get married, or the fact that they didn't have children, or But I think there's something else. There's a much, much larger issue, which we have to kind of take a step back and really think through. Because there's a part of the story which is really more disturbing, if you think about it, or more difficult to understand than any other part of the story itself. The Torah is telling us here, let's think about this for a minute. The Torah is telling us here about an incredibly painful tragedy that took place. The 2 sons of, think about it. There are exactly 5 Kohanim that are here, that are here to represent the Jewish people. There's Aaron himself, the Kohen Gadol, and 4 sons. After all the work and after all the money and after all the preparation and everything that had gone into this, Rachmana litzlan, no parent should ever have to go through this. In the life of Aaron, the father, in the presence of Aaron, the father, in the presence of Moshe, their uncle, in the presence of all the Jewish people who have literally just fallen on their face because of the great revelation of godliness, Rachmana litzlan, 2 of Aaron's sons, 2 of the 4 regular Kohanim to represent the entire Jewish people, collapsed to their death in a rush of fire that came forth from Hashem without apparently any warning or any background or any indication that this was about to happen. The Torah is telling us about a terrible, tragic story that befell the royal family of the Jewish people. Okay. Well, not okay, but there it is. And the rabbis rushed to give so many reasons why this happens. Well, they were eager to be leaders. They issued halachic rulings in front of their rabbis. They were disrespectful to Hashem. They were disrespectful to each other. They were disrespectful to Moshe and Aaron. Blah, all sorts of reasons. Okay. But Kana ben Shoel, here one cannot help but ask himself this question. Of all the times that Hashem chose to make this tragedy befall the Jewish people, of all of the moments in history that this could possibly have taken place, Ribono Shel Olam, why now? I mean, this is the moment of such extreme joy and such extreme spiritual fulfillment and excitement for the Jewish people. They've worked so hard for this moment. They've worked hard physically. They've donated money. To get Jews to give money is not always an easy thing. And they didn't stop give money. They gave more than enough money. The Jews were obviously so motivated to do this. I mean, you know what it's like to get Jews to build a shul? And not stam a shul. Here, the entire Jewish nation had to come together and all had to agree on one shul. And they did. And they did so, the Torah attests in Parsha Pekudei, the Torah says they did so exactly as Hashem instructed Moshe Rabbeinu. They built the Mizbeach and the Shulchan and the Oren and the Menorah and the Kalim and the walls and the curtains. They built and they constructed and they conformed and they configured and they had architects and they did it. The Torah says in Parsha Pekudei, the Torah repeats 18 times. They did it exactly as Hashem had instructed Moshe Rabbeinu. For 7 days they trained, picking the Mishkan up, putting it down and picking it up. At some point, even Moshe Rabbeinu himself, the Gemara tells us, couldn't pick it up. Hashem had to help him. So many miracles took place, and finally, everything comes together. It's the climax, it's the zenith of everything, and it's all merging. It's all coming together so beautifully. The Mishkan is finally standing. And the glory of Hashem finally rests upon it. Vayetzu vayevorchu es ha'am. Moshe and Aaron come out of the oil moed. They bless the people. They tell them, Yevorechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. Yoer Hashem ponav elecha v'choneka. Yisa Hashem ponav elecha v'yosim lecha shalom. A fire comes down from heaven, consumes the sacrifices on the Mizbeach, and all the Jewish people are there to witness it. It's one of the proudest and greatest and most beautiful moments in all of Jewish history. I mean, for the love of God, how many times do things go right? We have many stories where things don't go right, but here's a story where everything went right. Everything happened exactly as it was supposed to happen. Moshe did what he was supposed to do, and Aaron did what he was supposed to do, and all the Jewish people did what they were supposed to. The Mishkan was constructed, the Torah tests, 18 times. Exactly the way Hashem instructed. No. The Ribono Shel Olam couldn't give the Jews 1 day of peace. Is that too much to ask? 1 day where the Mishkan should stand and the sacrifices should be brought and everybody should do their job and there should be no disaster or strife or pain. Ribono Shel Olam, is it too much to ask? Give us, the Jewish people, 1 day, 1 hour to enjoy the fruits of our labor, to witness the glory of Hashem come down on the Mizbeach, for the Jewish people to fall on their faces, for the brachas of Moshe and Aaron, Yevarechecha, Yoer, Yisa, to ring in their ears. Can't we give the Jewish people, the Mishkan, Aaron, Moshe, after all they've been through, 210 years in Egypt, 1 day of peace? No! As soon as the glory of Hashem comes down, Nadav and Avihu come rushing in, and the day turns to disaster. Till this day, we're talking 3,500 years later, in Halacha, Rosh Chodesh Nisan has an element of Avelis to it. Do you know about this? It has practical ramification in Halacha. I'll tell you what it is. Young couples who get married, the Halacha is they have to fast the day of their marriage. The Halacha. The day of their wedding, they have to fast. What if they get married in Nisan? Halacha says no. Nisan is a special month. If you get married in Nisan, you don't have to fast. Okay? What about if you get married Rosh Chodesh Nisan? If you get married Rosh Chodesh Nisan, you have to fast. Why? Because Rosh Chodesh Nisan for all eternity, in a sense, is a sad day. It's the day of the death of Nadav and Avihu. It seems so incredibly cruel. Why would Hashem do this? Why? What would it have been so terrible if Hashem would have waited one more day or even one more hour? When you read the Psukim, the Torah makes it sound like they had one moment to enjoy this. They had one, as soon as the brachas were given and the fire came down from the Mizbeach, bah! Disaster strikes. And what a disaster! 2 sons die in the presence of their father, collapse dead in the Mishkan on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, in the presence of all the Jews and their father and their uncle Moshe Rabbeinu. Halachic confusion breaks forth. Nobody knows how to deal with this. Moshe and Aaron end up getting into an argument. What do you do with the korbanos? What's going on? I mean, could you imagine Aaron, Elazar and Isamar, the Kohen Gadol, and the only 2 Kohanim are now thrust into Avelis. They become Oinanim. What do you do with the Karbanis? What do you eat? What do you burn? Moshe Rabbeinu ends up getting angry and making mistakes. Oh, Stutzach. Everything goes to pot. It seems like the most difficult part of the story to understand here. What's the Torah trying to tell us? By telling us that this happened at such a critical moment. This is one of the incredibly difficult parts of the story to understand. What message is there in the Torah telling us that this happened at this moment, bedafka, when it seems like things couldn't get better? When they wanted a kapora. The purpose of the construction of the Mishkan was to gain kapora for the worshiping of the Egel Hazor. Okay. Hashem forgave them. The Jewish people meant it sincerely. They gave their money, they gave their time, they gave their effort, they did it. And even if Nadav and Avihu did commit some terrible, heinous avera, for which they were deserving of capital punishment, why strike them down now? And Rahman al-Itzlan, if Aaron deserved some kind of punishment for what he did, really, now? Later the Pasuk says that Aaron instructs the remaining Kohanim, Elazar and Isamar, to carry the bodies of their deceased brothers out of the Mishkan. Could you imagine that? The 2 Kohanim, Elazar and Isamar, have to carry their own lifeless brothers out of the Mishkan. They have to carry their corpses out. And Moshe Rabbeinu told them, he said, it's like you say, Haveras hameis melifnei hakala. He says, it's like you say, move aside he who has perished, because there is a wedding going on. It was Moshe Rabbeinu's way of articulating this contrast of emotion that's going on here. Where it was like lahavdil in the middle of a wedding. Imagine, in the middle of the wedding, the chassan's own two brothers dropped dead on the dance floor. And now Chevra Kadisha, run by another two brothers of the chassan, have to come in there and remove these two bodies in the middle of all the celebration. The timing of this, if you think about it, is completely, it's mind-bending. There's obviously some message in the Torah telling us this story, in the way the Torah tells us, in the peak, in the very moment of spiritual ecstasy of Moshe and Aaron and all the Jewish people, these two sons of Aaron are struck dead. Before I go on, it's very important to understand that none of these lessons, none of these insights are here to justify, to explain why Hashem did this. Only Hashem is responsible to answer, justify, and explain why this happened. What I'm after here is the lesson that we learn from this, and specifically the lesson in terms of the timing. There's one more explanation, and here it is. There's one more explanation, this one from the Ohr HaChaim, in terms of what the sin of Nadav and Avihu was. What it was specifically that they did wrong, that they deserved to die. And the Ohr HaChaim, I believe I've mentioned this in previous classes, but the Ohr HaChaim says that actually what happened was Nadav and Avihu experienced a rush of what we would call spiritual ecstasy. He says, the Ohr HaChaim writes that they had such a powerful surge of their neshama. It was so intense that they ran into the Mishkan, or according to some opinions, even into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in a moment of complete state of uncontrollable connection to Hashem. Their souls experienced it in such a powerful way that their death, says the Ohr HaChaim, is not meant to be understood necessarily as a punishment in a negative sense, but of a natural result of what they did. They unleashed their neshamas. It was such a great moment. There was so much kedusha. They were standing in the Mishkan, in the presence of the Nasi Adoir of Moshe, in the presence of the Kohen Gadol, their father Aaron. They were so delirious with joy over them being chosen to be the Kohanim, to represent the Jewish people, that they rushed into the Mishkan. They lost control over themselves spiritually. And because of that, their souls left their bodies. The Kedusha was too, the Ohr HaChaim says, the Kedusha, the connection to Hashem, was too intense. And so their souls passed on and rushed out and became one with Hashem in a way that their physical bodies couldn't handle. Excuse me. They left their physical bodies behind and became one with Hashem in a moment of spiritual elevation. Of course, the Ohr HaChaim isn't arguing with all the previous explanations. He's telling us that there's a deeper dimension to it. They didn't mean, God forbid, have ill intention. They weren't trying to be disrespectful to Moshe or to Aaron, to anything like that. They just simply lost control of themselves spiritually. We call this, in Kabbalah language, we call this klois hanefesh, right? Where an experience is so spiritually powerful that one risks actually losing themselves in the presence of this experience. Not, by the way, perhaps not very different to something that all the Jewish people experienced at Matan Torah, where when Hashem said to the Jewish people, Anochi Hashem Alekecha, the Gemara says every word that Hashem says, the Jews died. Every one of them. And the Rabbeinu Shalom revived them with Tchiyas HaMesim, only for them to hear another word and then to die again. Why were they dying? Well, they were dying because the experience, the connection to Hashem, was too strong and too powerful. And so because of that, their bodies couldn't handle it and they expired. perhaps the Orach Chaim's explanation on the death of Nadav and Avihu can be understood in the same way. He says they ran into the Mishkan or into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. They brought this Ketores because the moment the Kedusha was too intense for them. And so they lost themselves in it. And their souls left their bodies. And there, perhaps, my dear friends, right there lies the lesson that the Torah seeks to teach us by telling us that this happened at the moment where everything seemed wonderful and the moment where everything seemed beautiful. You see, it's like this. Nadav and Avihu were tzaddikim. They were very great tzaddikim. Later, Moshe will tell Aaron that they were tzaddikim even greater than Moshe and Aaron themselves. But yet, even they, despite being tzaddikim, got carried away with something. They rode a particular wave too far. And they died because of it. Their souls left their bodies. What was the wave that they rode? Well, they rode the wave of spiritual ecstasy and connection to Hashem. What's wrong with that? I'll tell you what's wrong with that. What's wrong with that is that it was selfish. And at that moment, Nadav and Avihu got lost in their own spiritual ecstasy and forgot that they were put there only to represent the rest of the Jewish people. And that, perhaps in a spiritual sense, is the deeper meaning of all their sins. They got carried away and they forgot, if but for a moment, that it wasn't really ultimately about them and that they were there to represent the Jewish people. And so ultimately, it didn't matter how spiritually elevated they felt. And it didn't matter how much spiritual ecstasy they were excited with. And it didn't matter how close they felt was their own connection to Hashem. They should have stopped themselves and said, this is not about me. Who is it about? It's about the 3 million Jews standing behind me that I represent. I dare say there was an element of humility that was missing from them, that they were particularly vulnerable to, but dafka at this moment, specifically at this moment, where everything came together so beautifully, and the glory of Hashem was present, and Moshe was present, and Aaron was present, and all the Jews were there, and everybody fell on their faces, and Nadav and Avihu looked at each other and said, we are the Koyanim. We represent the Jews. Hashem's presence will speak through us. The Mishkan is the holiest place in the world, and we're the ones who get to serve there. We want to get as close to Hashem as possible. Look at us. We are the Koyanim. We can get closer to Hashem than anybody can get. And off they ran into the Mishkan to experience a connection to Hashem, to experience spiritual excitement and spiritual ecstasy. Spiritual stimulation that no other Jew got to feel. And Hashem took them right at that moment, and Hashem said, no, you missed the point. At the moment of your greatest success, at the moment of your highest of highs, at the moment when everything is working out beautifully, and everything is coming together exactly as intended, in the moment when everything seems to be working, kasher tzivu Hashem es Moshe, at this moment, Nadav and Avihu in particular became vulnerable. Vulnerable to what? Vulnerable to believing that they were special. Vulnerable to believing that they were unique, they were chosen by Hashem, and but for a moment forgot why. Hashem said, I chose you because I want you to represent the Jews. Don't rush into the Mishkan with a fire that I didn't command you to bring. Hashem said, this is not about you. This is not about you. And so long as you remember that, you will be a Kohen and a Kohen Gadol, and you'll represent the Jews, and you'll do a fantastic job. But the moment you forget that, you'll be gone. We have a Chabad story, which I know I've shared with you in the past, but it's worthwhile to repeat. We have a Chabad story about the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, who was sitting in prison, imprisoned by the terribly anti-Semitic Tsarist regime on all sorts of trumped-up false charges. And he's visited by a minister while he's in prison. And the minister, who had studied the Chumash, asks the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe, he asked him why, when Adam and Chava had sinned and eaten from the Eitz Hadas, and they hid behind the tree because they were ashamed. Why, said this minister to the Alter Rebbe, why did God ask them? Why did the voice of God call out in the Garden of Eden and say to Adam, Ayeko, where are you? What, did God not know where Adam was? All right, Rashi says, the Alter Rebbe told him, the Alter Rebbe said it was in order to make small talk. Hashem didn't want to come at him off the bat with some heavy accusations. They made small talk first. The guy said to the Rebbe, that's the explanation of Rashi, I know it, I want to hear your explanation. And the Alter Rebbe said to him, Ayeka, the question of Hashem, where are you, is the eternal call that God calls to every human being that walks the face of this earth. Ayeka, where are you in terms of fulfilling the mission that you were put here to do? Do you know what your job is? Do you know what your responsibilities are? Are you aware of the people upon whom you have influence? Are you aware of the people to whom you have to reach? Are you aware who you represent? Do you wake up every morning with a sense of urgency, with a bounce in your step, with a fire under your chair? If Hashem gave you a day, there's something you need to do with it. Ayeka, where are you in terms of doing what it is that you need to do? There's a reason why Hashem put us here. That's the question that Hashem asks everybody. It's a question Hashem asks a Russian minister. It's a question Hashem asks a Rebbe. It's a question Hashem asks Adam and Chava. It's a question Hashem asks you and I. And it's a question Hashem asks Nadav and Avihu. Don't tell me you're a very big tzaddik. Don't tell me this is the greatest day of your life. Don't tell me there is a glory and presence of Hashem that is manifest here like never before in Jewish history. Don't tell me the Mishkan has been constructed exactly the way Hashem wanted it to. Don't tell me Moshe and Aaron have just blessed the people with the most beautiful blessing ever. Don't tell me that the Jewish people have fallen on their faces in a state of spiritual ecstasy. Don't tell me that everything is as beautiful as it gets. Don't tell me that this is good enough, Hashem says. Tell me what you're going to do about it. Tell me that you remember that you were put here for a mission and a reason. Don't tell me what you're getting caught up in. Tell me that you know that you're here to represent the Jews. And if the fire you're rushing into the Mishkan with is not one that was instructed by Hashem, if the fire on your frying pan was not told to you by Moshe and Aaron, if you've gotten so wrapped up that you don't even have time to talk to each other, then no matter how holy you are, you've gotten wrapped up in yourself. Yes, you've gotten wrapped up in yourself in a very great moment. You've gotten wrapped up in yourself in a very holy moment. But the holiness of the time and the greatness of the time has made you vulnerable. Even the tzaddikim that they were, Nadav and Avihu, were challenged at this moment because of their great sensitivity, because of their great awareness, because of their deep-rooted appreciation for what it was that were going on here, because they saw the Jewish people fall on their faces and they said, this is unbelievable. Hashem's presence is here like never before. Let's take advantage of it. Let's embrace it. Let's engrave this experience in our souls and never forget it. Let's embrace it with everything we have. And Hashem said to them, really? Why? Why are you so excited about this? Why are you so passionate? What's driving you? Because this is something that you want, Says Hashem, what about what I want? There's a reason. There's a reason why I made a Mishkan. There's a reason why my presence is here. And there's a reason why I chose you, Nadav and Avihu, to be the Koyanim. And it's not for your spiritual fulfillment. It's not so you can feel good about yourselves. It's not so you can feel connected. You should feel connected, but that's not the purpose. Look back over your shoulder, says Hashem, there's 3 million Jews. What's going on with them? Are you in touch with them? Do you know what they need? Do you know what they want? You're going to have to serve them every waking day of your life. That's the job of Koyanim. You think, says Hashem, I've given you a position of leadership for the sake of leadership. Avdos ani noisen lachem. As Koyanim, you are servants and shluchim of the people. That's your job as Koyanim. And if you forgot that at the moment of the greatest spiritual ecstasy, then for whatever divine reason, Hashem says, you're not going to continue functioning as Koyanim. Not in my Mishkan, says Hashem. Not in my Mishkan. Not for one more day. Not for one more hour. Not for one more minute. Your brothers will take over, Elazar and Isamar, because they never got carried away with themselves. Of course, my dear friends, you and I, we're not challenged with these types of challenges. But it is a lesson, and it's a lesson for us too. And it's the Torah's way of reminding us that the Yetzer Hara never sleeps. And self-centeredness and selfishness is a sin, no matter who you are and no matter where you are on the spiritual ladder. And a vulnerability, spiritual vulnerability to sin and to selfishness comes in all shapes and sizes. Don't think because today is a great day that we're immune. Don't think that because my name is Nadav and Avihu, therefore I am immune and I'm safe. Don't think because I am the son of Aaron HaKohen or the nephew of Moshe Rabbeinu that I am protected from the Yetzer Hara. Al tamin ba'atzmoch ad yoim moisach. Never forget the call of Hashem to every one of us. Ayeka, where are you? Do you remember, do you and I remember what it is that we're here to do? Are we seeking selfish grandeur? Do we want to be something? Are we looking somewhere where we're not supposed to look? Are we rushing into the Kodesh HaKadoshim because we want to feel close to Hashem? Or are we remembering every day of our lives to serve the Jewish people in whatever way Hashem has chosen us to do? A painful lesson, but nevertheless, one which is relevant to all of us. May Hashem bless us all, that we experienced in our lives only simchas and nachas and gesund and hatzlacha and all the most wonderful blessings for us and our families. At the same time, let's always hear that call of Hashem that the Alter Rebbe talked about. Ayeka, where are we? Let's know, let's always know. Let's be blessed with clarity that we know what our mission is and pursue it every waking moment of our lives. Have a wonderful Shabbos.